Well, hello there. This is Shield of Life, and I'm super excited about the show. Here with our host, Alan and Mike, and with my husband, Dr. Scott Klioze.
And Dr. Andria Klioze is talking to you right now. Let me introduce you there, girl.
And this is Dr. Andria Klioze. So as we begin, we have a group of very interesting people with lots of fun personalities. So hopefully they will share their character as we walk through this journey together, and also lots of information on healing and disease reversal. One of the things that we wanted to talk about today was electromagnetic frequency, pulsed electromagnetic frequency. So my engineering husband, I'll have him start to tell you a little bit about what PMF is about.
Well, let's just start with electromagnetic frequencies, okay? So an electromagnetic, if you look at the electromagnetic frequency spectrum, that includes everything from, on one end, radio waves all the way up to X-rays on the other end. That's going from the longest waves to the shortest waves. And as you get up higher, these are more energetic waves. That's why X-rays can penetrate bodies and different objects. Radio waves travel very, very far, but they don't penetrate very well. So, and right in the middle of all that, you have the visible spectrum, and that's what our eyes detect. The retina in our eyes are able to detect frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum that our brains interpret as colors. So that's the entire spectrum. Sound is not part of that. So an electromagnetic frequency is basically an electrical pulse, an electrical current that has an associated magnetic field with it. So that defines the EMF. And it's funny to watch the evolution of it. So we're constantly bathed in EMF. The Earth itself has its own electromagnetic frequency. It's
7.86.
It's a slow, cycle, and it's basically due to the rotating molten iron core that's rotating around, and those have electrons in them. So anytime you have a moving electron, by definition, that is a current. And if you use the right-hand rule, is what we used to do, so you put your fingers in the direction of that flowing current, and your thumb points in the direction of the orthogonal magnetic moment. So that's an electromagnetic frequency. And I remember when we were growing up as kids, you would talk about the transformer stations for the power lines, and they would come into these transformer stations, and of course they're converting alternating current into either step up or step down, and there's an associated magnetic field. And back then they'd say, oh, these electromagnetic fields are horrible for you, they cause cancer, they do all this other stuff. And remember, they wouldn't allow you to, they said, don't live near one of these stations because it's going to be problematic. And now we've come 180 degrees, and we're like, no, this stuff's good for you. You need to be near some electron. At one point in time, they wouldn't even want you sitting with a electric blanket, because it had an associated magnetic field with it. But now Andria's got a whole part of her business where they do the electromagnetic frequencies, and they're controlled. There's certain frequencies, and they're at a level that seem to promote health and healing, not cancers and untoward effects. So it's amazing to watch the evolution, but it just goes to show you we don't know, right? I mean, every time we think we know better than God, we figure out we're wrong. So, and I like to say everything in moderation, but that really torques Andrea. So I'm not going to say that this time.
Everyone's definition of moderation, and that's why that's a problem.
That's why she doesn't like it.
So electromagnetic frequency began in the United States, because when you look up some of these companies, they don't always go into what happened in the United States. And that began in the 1960s by a guy named Dr. Bassett. And he actually got it approved for the FDA. He was an orthopedic surgeon, and he saw that direct current actually stimulated the flux of electrons into that area, helping bone healing. But what happened is it would burn.
When she says direct current, this guy was actually putting electrodes into broken bones. So, and that was generating a current in those tissues,
allowing it to heal, but it would also burn the tissue. So this wasn't the best option. So he worked with an engineer, and they created the coil, the concept of a coil. So as that wave is being generated around that coil, there was a field on either side of that flowing current that generated an electromagnetic field. And it was through that field that when they laid that adjacent to the patient's skin, that it would allow not to burn the tissue, but it would allow still for that flow of electrons and flow of molecules like calcium and phosphorus and vitamin D and other molecules that were needed to get to the bone to actually help the bone heal. And it also helped with vascular flow. And some later studies showed that it actually helped some genetic changes that were actually helpful for the whole process of healing. So that science, which was really invented back in the time of Nicholas Tesla, the concept of electromagnetic fields, but then later being used now in the field of medicine and healthcare to help promote healing, wound healing, tissue healing, accelerated bone healing, tendon and nerve healing. And so we got involved because of Tony and Audrey Lewis, who actually taught us about the Beamer, which was the first design that was made by Dr. Kafka in Europe, in Germany, and Liechtenstein specifically. And we met Dr. Kafka in this year when we celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. We went to Munich, and we talked to him about the evolution of Beamer, and then he left Beamer and created a company called Centropics, or he worked with two of the current owners of it, and they've improved the electromagnetic waveform, and so you don't become tolerant of it, and it actually has a lot higher strength of a field strength that improves deeper tissues, tendons, and nerves, and has been profound in the healing of not only people's tissues, but also in animals, especially they're using it in horses. They also have a bubble that actually helps emit energy that helps people with a lot of anxiety and tension and depression and autism, and it's been able to stabilize their anxiousness and their feelings.
I think the bubble's voodoo.
So
my personal thoughts.
My feeling is that we've actually walked into a world, and I don't know that I was excited to walk into this world. I walked in there with skepticism, but because I've seen so much transformation by changing simple things like nutrition, exercise, sleep, breathing, spirituality, that's free, and community, that I started with an open mind to say, maybe it's not voodoo. Maybe we should experience this, and then delved into the science behind it. And it was fascinating working with Dr. Kafka and talking to him. What did you find interesting in the things that you learned from him?
Well, first of all, the first company, Beamer, was actually an acronym for bioelectric. What did it stand for?
I don't remember exactly.
But it actually stood for some bioelectric, magnetic something. And, it's applying this energy, as Andrea talked about, to induce currents in the body. And what I found interesting is that, his science and his research was based on these earlier studies. And to mimic those early studies, he came up with a whole spectrum of magnetic frequencies that he found would induce these healing currents in patients. And there was a lot of myths that I think that were propagated in Beamer, not from him, but when you get the salespeople in there, and that's probably why he left, because they talk about, it induces, it improves blood flow, and they have this same green screen basically video of a skin flap, and it's showing that after you apply this electromagnetic field that you're seeing the blood cells run through the vessels quicker, and I'm like, well, I don't understand how that happens. I'm not sure what that's all about. And I don't even know if they just sped up the tape or something. But it was the same green screen that was up. So it was very refreshing from him because, he's the scientist. And then you have a lot of salespeople underneath of him. And I think some of these things got propagated. But talking to him, it kind of separated the wheat from the chaff. And it was very, for me, it was very refreshing to hear someone talk about this from a scientific standpoint. And that's what he provided for me, and dispelled some of those myths that were being propagated by, lay people who were trying to sell this product. So.
One thing I thought was fascinating is he was talking to us about basically the pulsed electromagnetic activation, where the molecules are being activated, the charge is an activation at a higher level. And then once those electrons are activated, then it actually helps to improve whatever is in the field that needs to be adjusted, whether it's the flow of calcium and phosphorus, whether it impacts the decreased inflammation in a vessel, improving vascular flow, whether it's nerve tissues. But one of the things he did say is that what they're finding with the higher levels of field strength was that they were able to stimulate electrons and charges that activated nerves, and that those nerves then led to muscle contractility. And one of the newer devices, so they sell the bubble, they sell the mats, they are cloud mats. There's a small and a large one. And then they also have a new device coming out called the Leo, and we are going to be beta testing it. Shield of Life will be beta testing it. And it's very exciting because what they found is it almost feels like you've got an electromagnetic stim or a stimmy device on your muscle, because you can feel the contractility. But it's actually being propagated. What he said was it's being propagated by an activation of the nerve that then leads to the muscle contractility. And one of the stories that happened was they had a horse that when they were developing these mats, the mats for the horses as well as the humans, they had a horse that had progressive neurologic decline in the left lower hip or the left hip. And usually when the horse develops this, which is very rare, they usually have to put the horse down. And she was a young horse that was a competitive horse, very expensive horse. So they went ahead and they put the cloud mat on the horse, and not only did she recover, which was unheard of, but she was pregnant at the time, and the foal that usually takes about 4 hours or 5 hours to stand and find their legs stood instantly. So they've also shown recovery on wounds, and we've seen that many times with patients of ours and not patients, but clients of ours that use the electromagnetic frequency mats, healing from tendinopathies and neuropathies, healing from vascular flow. It's actually fascinating. Scott, you have your own stories to tell of what the electromagnetic frequency devices have helped you with.
Yeah, I always tell everyone I'm willing to share my anecdotal experience because, bottom line is they don't know exactly why this helps with healing. There's research that shows that it does, but the exact mechanism I think is somewhat difficult to define, whether it's, activating these molecules, stimulating, the electrons in atoms to a higher state. I don't know if anyone really knows for sure, but the first one that really made me think that something was going on is I had my own control. I had bilateral plantar fasciitis. And Andrea was trying to get me to sit on her voodoo mat, and she goes, "You got to try this." And I'm like, "Andrea, that thing's not going to do anything for me. I don't know what that." So my right foot was worse than my left. Okay, so she wrapped my foot up in this thing, and I sat there for about 20 minutes or so,
maybe more.
And then she took it off, and she goes, "How does it feel?" And I stood up. I'm like, "Oh, Andrea, it's worse than it was before." Your mat is trying to kill me, okay?
That's exactly what he said.
You made it worse. And so I kind of hobbled to bed, all disappointed that my foot was now worse. The next morning I woke up and my pain in my right foot was gone that quick. So, and I still had it in my left foot. So I had my own control. So, I obviously something happened that reduced that inflammation. And whether it was just, relatively like taking off tight shoes at the end of the day, it just relatively feels better than what you had on. But I think it really did help me. I mean, I felt better. And then the next event that I had is when I was playing pickleball.
The arm.
Well, that one I don't remember as well. You'll have to tell that one. But I ripped my Achilles playing the old man sport pickleball, which I was told was a safe old man sport. Oh no, don't, that will kill you. Be careful with the pickleball. And I found that out after my injury. I had played about 8 games, no problem. And then on that 9th game, Andrew and I were on the same side, and it felt like somebody smacked me on the back of the leg.
He accused me of doing it.
I did. I looked at Andrea. I'm like, "Andrea, what the heck was that?" And she goes, and I'm sitting there seeing her paddle in her hand. I'm like, well, obviously she didn't throw her paddle at me, because that's what it felt like. Somebody slapped me in the back of the leg. And as soon as she said that, I knew I'd ripped my Achilles. And, because I'm in the medical field, I'm a radiologist, so I had access to an MRI. So I went the next morning, had the MRI. It was completely ripped except for one little fiber. I called up my orthopedic buddy who basically had me in the OR like 2 or 3 days after that. And so then I had to go through the convalescence. And if you guys have ever ripped a tendon, it takes forever because they don't have a direct blood supply. It kind of, heals by osmosis almost, especially where these things rip, which is in the middle of the tendon. So, they told me it's a 6+ month convalescence. So, of course, I couldn't do anything else. And Andrew's like, you got to try the beamer. I'm like, all right, let's do this again. But I couldn't do anything else. So I sat on that thing like 2 or 3 times a day and did the beamer. I went back at the end of my 3 weeks and they were amazed at how quickly I had healed. So much so that my superficial stitches in my overlying my Achilles in the back of my ankle were buried into the skin. That's how, robust my skin grew. And the girl had to dig them out. I almost passed out. She had to dig them out to pull them out of me. As a matter of fact, I think they still left one of them in there.
So don't use these devices if you have sutures in.
Yeah.
Wait to use it after the sutures.
The other thing was they told me it was going to be like 6 months convalescence. By 3 weeks, I was pretty much out of the brace. By 6 weeks, I could actually do almost like a squat jump.
Yeah.
So this is a newly repaired tendon. So yeah, I mean, it's hard because I don't have the control to say, yeah, I had 2 of them. One of them healed really quick and one of them didn't. But I did. They were really impressed with my convalescence. So I do think that there was something to it.
Yeah. And then you were putting together the pig fence that had fallen apart in the side yard, and he bled into his forearm, and he was in a lot of pain and had been complaining of not sleeping. And I said, the PMF device is going to help with your circulation to get that blood out of the tissue. So he said, okay. He hadn't slept for 3 nights, so he was exhausted, and he does pretty strenuous work, And so he used it, and he goes, man, I can't believe it. Your stupid device worked again. So, it's interesting, and I've had so many people with wound healing, and these devices with the back, improvement in lower spine and back and muscle. I had a young lady come and see us, and Scott's partner, she had injured her shoulder and her neck and saw a significant difference between using the old device and the newer cloud device. She said, I could feel it instantly. Emma, who used the old device and now used the newer cloud device, felt her knee was definitely a significant improvement. So they have smaller mats, and then they also have a larger body mat. I use both because I lay on the one in the morning, and at night I lay on it at a low level at R for rest. And basically it helps me relax at night. In the morning, I wake up before I do a run or go work out. I do E for energize and then T for transform. After
She's
a
always
hard,
on this mat.
Yeah, I
Seriously.
won't go anywhere without it. He always is giving me a hard time.
I'm like, Andrea, come over here in bed and scratch my back and rub my feet. Hold on, I got a bit on my mat first. She knows that I'll fall asleep by the time she gets in there. She stays on there and I'm asleep.
But the impact,
I mean, it's a ploy.
I've qualified 3 times at 57 for Boston, and I'm not really a runner. I am a runner, but I'm not one of those kind of real athletic running people. But it's kind of interesting at 57 to qualify. I think it has to do with my lifestyle, and I really do believe that my friends who I run with get injured and take a longer time to recover than I do with the cloud. And so I do believe in it, and we wouldn't sell things in Shield of Life or rent them if I didn't believe them. We don't sell products, but we do sell in the sense of vitamins or nutrients, because I feel like God gives us what we need, and when we do need to take supplements, they're very few for a period of time. But I do believe in the cloud mat, and we're going to have the Leo here to try out. So if any of you, those are local, and you'd like to rent them or try them because you're suffering from pain or injury, we'd love for you to let us know. shieldoflife.com. You can go on our website and reach out to us.
And my advice is stay away from the pickleball.
Yeah.
The best way to treat this is don't even get the injury in the first place.
Yeah, if you have injuries from pickleball, give us a call because we can help you heal sooner. But it's amazing technology. It's nice to use to heal, from things without having to take a lot of medications. And it helps with rest and sleep and recovery and your immune health. During COVID, we had a lot of people using the PMF devices to help them recover faster from COVID.
You actually have this in our bed, don't you?
Yeah, I have one in our bed.
I'm hoping to get like
my side of the bed, yeah.
Like some of the fringe,
fringe benefits.
Some of the fringe electromagnetic fields that are coming over to my side of the bed.
I'm curious, do you think this type of stuff will help? I mean, one of the biggest things we're suffering suffering from today, country-wise, is dementia. Do you think this possibility they'll look into to see whether this electromagnetic stuff will actually help improve that?
I think it's a great question, and I can tell you that PMF mats are not FDA approved for the head. I can tell you that there are a lot of people that do use them. We have anecdotal stories where people's hemorrhagic, that was one of the reasons why I ended up trying the first time. I had a woman with a massive hemorrhagic stroke come up to my table in one of the Ormond Beach events at the Mayor's Challenge when we were just introducing ourselves. And she came up and said, I use this Beamer device, this PMF device, after having a hemorrhagic stroke. And she said, look, and I'm like, when you have a massive hemorrhagic stroke, you're lucky to breathe and talk, let alone walk. And I was very impressed by this woman's story. And around the world, they've used PMF devices, including these mats, for improvement in cognitive performance, and visual improvement for vascular flow to the eyes. We've had many, many stories. But again, we can't encourage that because it's not FDA approved for the head. So
that's a great question, though, Mike.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the problems we have with our neurocognitive decline, again, it's what we talked about in that last show is our lifestyles and what we're doing to our bodies, these constant inflammatory states, and we're probably killing. You got to understand Parkinson's disease. By the time you're clinically symptomatic, you've already killed off like 80% of the substantia nigra where the dopamine is produced, and then 80% within the striatum, which is where it's used. So, it's by the time it's clinically manifest, you've already done damage. So this is the stuff that you don't even know what's happening until you get later in life, and that's why it takes decades. But I can tell you one of the things we see as a radiologist, we see more and more of these people who have what we call small vessel ischemic demyelination. You get an MRI, and they've got all these white areas, T2 weighted images in their deep white matter tracts. And personally, I believe, like you talked about earlier, is that we're over-treating hypertension. We call hypertension essential and we don't know where it's coming from, right? So you say, oh, he's got essential hypertension. They put you on a medication, right? Because hypertension's bad. But it's probably from the lifestyle we're living, what we're eating, with all that other stuff, but it's still called essential. So we're artificially lowering that blood pressure. For some reason, our bodies want that blood pressure up, because we call it essential. We don't know it. The body knows. God knows why you need it. And then you artificially lower it. So one of the most sensitive parts of our body for blood flow is our brain, right? So if you're artificially lowering your blood pressure with these pills, it makes sense to me that over time, you're probably destroying stuff up in your head that
needed that blood flow.
That needed the blood flow, right? So now we're seeing the untoward consequences of over-medicating people. So, it's just, it all fits together, but it's an awesome question. And I'm hoping, if Andrea has her way and transforms our counties here, then you'll see a marked decline in cognitive degeneration, which is really a big problem now with the aging population. For sure.
I think we've all seen it, but we don't really understand it because we don't look at historically.
100%.
Where were we as a country 60, 70, 80 years ago? Well, we weren't suffering from the things that we're suffering from now. And I'm in a full agreement with you, but with no medical knowledge to my own, but that the pharmaceutical world has caused a lot of the issues that we're running into. They will fix something, but cause something else.
100%.
And I'm all about, with working with the folks that we work with, and trying to get the treatment providers to provide the right types of treatment. Don't just cover it with a Band-Aid. Don't just put some salve on it. Dig down what's caused it.
Fix the problem.
Yep. Okay? And I think the medical community in general is not designed today to fix a problem.
100%. I couldn't agree more. The first time I had this revelation that we are not what we used to be is when my mom and my stepfather were in town, and we were down in South Daytona at the Shores. I don't know if you know where the Shores Hotel is down there. And they have a lot of the historic photos from the races when they were on the beach, back then. And so my stepfather looks at me and goes, what do you notice about these pictures? And I'm looking at them. You cannot find an overweight person in those pictures. nowhere. I mean, they're all, now you go to those races, you can't find a thin person anywhere in those pictures. I mean, we've really destroyed ourselves. And, we're seeing all of these, degenerative disorders, neurodegenerative, cardiac, vascular, and, at a much younger age. I mean, granted, we may have been living longer, and every decade we statistically live a little bit longer, but I think we've reached that pinnacle. Some of that may have been from COVID, but I think for the first time since we've been recording, they think that the next generation is going to live less. Their life expectancy is less than ours. First time ever.
I personally think, as you're saying, that this has a lot to do with pushing the pharmaceuticals, because
I agree.
Prior to me discovering my glucose level being astronomically high, I knew I was pre-diabetic. I also had no pain, no issue, so I ignored it, which was the stupid part. But it didn't bother my life, so I wasn't worried about it. However, when I did go to the doctors, and at that point I was about 190 on my reading, and he said, well, we got to put you on insulin. Didn't mention anything about changing diet, changing lifestyle. No, we got to put you on insulin. And I said, I don't want to go on insulin. I don't want to be insulin dependent. He then said, well, we have to get this down, so we'll do Ozempic. And, I've heard you say we don't know what the long-term effect of all this overuse of Ozempic is going to be. But he put me on Ozempic. I don't have insurance. It costs more for me to have insurance than just to pay the bill. So I used it for about 2 months. I didn't feel very well with it. I lost some weight with it. My levels went down, but at what cost? I was concerned. And when the free samples ran out, Ozempic's $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I said, no, forget this. So I went off everything. And that's when everything creeped back up and hit the 400 mark, and I changed my diet. It's all I had to do, lifestyle and diet. But they never mentioned it. No. They mentioned drugs. Here, take this, take this, take this. Never mentioned, hey, change your lifestyle.
Yeah. The issue is that doctors don't know how to teach a lifestyle. We're told that you have to promote lifestyle first, but we really aren't taught, and doctors don't believe that people want to change. Many times doctors will say, Dr. Andrea, how do you do that? How do you get people to change their life? But it's because they don't study it, nor are they given tools to help people. And they don't believe that a patient wants to, because the patient wants a quick fix, and they got 15 minutes to see the patient and get them out of the room. So a pill's a lot faster than saying, let's go through a program for you. And the patient doesn't want to go to another provider, meaning a nutritionist, or somebody else to go change. And diet is one thing, but to really continue to make important changes, it's diet, it's exercise. And there's so many things to maximize performance and improve longevity to really help people. And going back to what happened in the last 40 to 60 years, it's not just that we started taking more medications, which started about in the 1960s, 70s, when medications started coming around after penicillin. So that was the 1930s, 40s. When was penicillin?
Yes.
Yeah. So
a long time ago.
It was after that. And that's when doctors used to take care of their own patients. They didn't have insurance companies. And they also would give their own medications out. But as the medication industry got busier and busier and more medications were made, doctors couldn't control all of this. And they were having their own struggle with their own lives, with their own families. So they gave their practice of medicine up to insurance companies, and then first the pharmaceutical company and then insurance companies somewhere around the same time period. But so that became a big problem, because the field of medicine then became a business. And it didn't become your doc down the street, who's your buddy that your kids grew up together with, was no longer the doctor that really loved you and cared for you. And it was really this vocation. I feel that medicine is my vocation. It's not an occupation. And I think most people still see it as an occupation, unless they're the older docs that have that mindset. The other problem is that about 40, 50 years ago, we actually moved inside, and leaving the earth, leaving sunshine was a big, and leaving hard labor was a big transformation to humankind. And nobody wants to look at that, but it was a big problem and what caused our transformation. So it was a combination of all those things.
And as we've been talking outside of this is some of the things that you are working on, trying to bring back.
Yes.
Okay, you're talking about us learning how to better farm our vegetables and do this and get back to the creation time that was all designed to keep us in that level. So that's this. If folks, when you're listening to this podcast as it grows, you're going to find some tremendous information coming out, stuff that you're probably going to want to get involved in, and you'll be able to do that. And we're really excited to have this happening.
Hopefully we'll be doing it for the next 50 years, and everyone will know we were right?
And
so if we're all 140 years old still doing this show, they're going to say, yeah.
Being the eldest person in the room,
you're going to be 160.
Huh?
You're going to be 160.
He'll be our Moses.
Yeah,
That's right.
I always warn people. I said, when they call me that, they call me Moses a lot. And I said, well, don't forget, he not only opened the Red Sea, but he closed it on those he didn't like.
I think that time is up. You gotta
All right.
close your show.
All right, guys. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode that dealt with pulsed electromagnetic frequency. Hopefully you learned something. And if you'd like to learn more, come visit us at shieldoflife.com. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And we'd love to hear more from our audience. Have a great evening or a great day.